There is a famous saying about catching rabbits. I think it goes something like this. You should try to catch as many rabbits as possible in order to catch a single one. And so true to this saying, in today's video we're gonna go back on the steel yacht and continue working on the shower cabin. If you feel like you're having a déjà vu, that's probably because this is already the 5th video in which I'm documenting the build of this shower cabin. Last time we spoke about the cabin, the main structure was already finished. All the boards were cut to size and fitted precisely to their final destination. Though the boards were in place and mostly finished, they weren't fully painted yet. So at this point I had to disassemble everything once again. What came next were countless hours of sanding the boards, painting the boards, letting them dry for a few days, and then repeating the process over and over again until I got the clean, almost industrial finish I was looking for. Next came the strenuous task of reassembly, which I'm gonna show you now, and I have to point out that I will not follow the strict chronological order in which I build things, as it's almost impossible to do this, given that everything takes place in a mere 1.5 square meters, or about 16 square feet, so you may see things appear and disappear as I go along, and it may not always make sense, but at least now you know why. Now then, everything you've seen so far had already been shown in one of the several videos I've showed you about this build beforehand, so from here on out it's all gonna be new developments. I've covered up the little angle that holds this large frontal panel in place with a little piece of oak wood. This does not only cover up the metal, but also holds the ceiling plate in place. After I put in the door for the very last time, it was time to get started with the plumbing. Here I first need to connect the hot and cold water supply for the shower tap. And because I'm using Wales' Quick Connect system, this is a fast and uncomplicated endeavor. From the other side, I feed the pipes through the holes I drilled before and then connect the tubes. Now that the water supply is connected, I can install the large panel that covers the wall indefinitely. I am very pleased that the holes I cut into the panel line up perfectly with the through hulls. The long plate that covers the floor area diagonally has also been installed, and I've covered up the small space behind the pipe for the toilet outlet. Now I can connect the drain for the shower tub to the Whale shower sump. My drain is composed out of different adapters from the hardware store, and so now I can put this in place. I've already connected the outlet to the through hull, and with that it's time for a little test. Before I continue, I better finish connecting the bilge pump to its through hull. And with that, the plumbing of the water outlets is finished. I showed you in a previous video that I was testing different dimmers for LED lights, and this is the one I ended up using. I attached the LED strip to an aluminum L profile, which I then install above the window. Before starting to work on this build, I had already installed a 24-volt power line in this area, so now I could directly wire up the light to that. To install the dimmer module, I cut a small piece of 2 mm thick plywood plate. I use tiny bolts to attach the dimmer to the wooden plate, and I use double-sided tape to install the module at the exterior of the shower cabin. The dimmer knob was also installed with double-sided tape. After making sure that everything was fine in the area with the electronics, I can cover this up indefinitely. And for this I'm using screws, so that if later on I have to work on these wires again, I can easily remove this cover. Next I'm gonna put in the plate that covers the overhanging area underneath the window, and then the board that covers the window area. A very important part is this door step, as this will keep the water inside the shower tub. I'll fix it in place with 2 wood screws. Next I'm gonna install the handle for the toilet flush. This, you may remember, I carved out of a wooden stick to encase the little trigger button for the toilet pump. And before anybody complains about the foot of the toilet being so dirty and rusty, we did eventually take the time to paint that. Next, I'm going to install the shower fixtures. I got a very nice shower tap, which will be held in place by two L-type connectors, which are directly hooked up to the hot and cold water line from behind the panel. In a recent video, I showed you how I tested Anker's flagship powerhouse 757, and I liked it so much that when Anker asked me to test their new, more compact powerhouse 555, I said yes immediately. It comes with all the necessary accessories, such as a power brick, a solar charger adapter, which allows you to recharge fully in just 5.5 hours with a maximum 200 watt power input. With its durable and drop-proof unibody design, it's perfectly suited for outdoors applications. Equipped with lithium iron phosphate battery cells, it can withstand up to 3000 charging cycles, or about 6 times more than the industry average. So no matter what kind of electrical device you need to use outdoors, in your boat or in your camper, the Powerhouse 555 will deliver up to 1000 watts through its AC sockets and up to 1364 watts throughout all its combined power outlets. We have a regular 12-volt car socket and 5 USB ports, one among which can also be used as a power input. With its 5-year warranty and 10-year lifespan, I will have all the time in the world to test out a variety of electrical devices that can be powered with the Powerhouse 555. And as a little Easter egg, the reading light built into the front panel can be programmed to flash in the pattern of the SOS Morse code. So after this video, go ahead and click the link in the description to check out more details about the Anker Powerhouse 555. Next I install the shower head. And with that, we have a perfectly conventional shower. Now would be a good time to add some insulation to the area around the window. Here I'm using Armaflex 19mm. And with that done, I can now install the board covering the window area permanently. Next we have to seal and close off all those corners to make the shower cabin watertight. In some areas I also need to add some wood to hold up the ceiling. To do this, I got 3 sizes of wooden strips, as I'm not sure which one will be the best size. However, so far I've only used the biggest one, and I did of course treat them with oil or boat lacquer beforehand. I found it very challenging to get a perfect fit between the different strips because the strips themselves are curved and the angles at which they connect are usually completely random, meaning somewhere between 45 and 90 degrees. To put them in place, I sometimes use only a polyurethane-based sealant, and sometimes I would screw them in place. For this I drill a hole, countersink the hole, and then use a simple stainless steel wood screw. Wherever 3 strips meet in a more or less 90-degree angle, I tried my best to cut them in a way that the area of contact will appear as seamless as possible. But to be honest, I'm not particularly satisfied with how this turned out. Sadly, I am subject to severe time constraints at the moment, so I can't really spend the time that I would need to figure this out properly and improve my technique. So for this element of the build, I'm gonna have to live with some compromise. Now all the strips in the forward section of the shower cabin are in place. So I can go ahead and add the polyurethane sealant to hopefully make everything watertight. Here's the result with the sealant in place. To finish up, I'm gonna add some sealant underneath the metal part of the drain. And so with all that done, the shower cabin should be ready for a first little test. All the plumbing is in place. The bilge is dry at the beginning of our test, so let's do it. Alright, the shower sump is working and the entire line of the shower sump inlet and outlet appear to be tight. Next I'm gonna test if the shower tub can hold the water in a normal shower situation. By the way, that loud pump you're hearing is our accumulator tank. It's really loud and really annoying. So later on, I'm gonna build a sound dampening box around it. Back to our test. Surprisingly, the bilge remained completely dry when using the shower normally. So next, I'm gonna put in the plug to find out if the shower tub is really watertight. It appears to be holding the water quite well. Apparently, there's only one corner where the water is slowly dripping out. The rest seems to be pretty much watertight. Even after several minutes, the water level remained pretty much unchanged. So me personally, I'm pretty happy with that result. Because the drain doesn't sit at the lowest point, there will always be some water that can flow off at the end of each shower. I actually came up with a solution for this by making some kind of a ramp that sits behind the drain and that would guide the remaining water towards the drain, but I deemed it too complicated to get this installed without making the entire installation look quite messy. So for now, we're just gonna have to wipe the shower tub manually after each shower. Of course, the area around the window is unfinished. Same goes for the areas behind the toilet. Once again, because of some time constraints, I was forced to hold off on finalizing these areas. So in the meantime, in order to take a shower, we'll simply put up a curtain. My wife found a soap that's made out of all natural ingredients. Admittedly, I'm not happy about dumping our shower water directly outside of the boat. And if you feel offended by this, I invite you to go check out my disclaimer I made on this topic in an earlier video. I put a link in the description here below. And so that concludes the video series about building a shower cabin on a steel yacht. Of course, I will be posting updates about the few remaining items as soon as I get to it, but for the main part, it's time to move on. Next, I want to give you some updates about the big boat, and I'm also going to comment on some frequently posted topics in the comment sections of previous videos. First up, we've mounted the motors onto the transoms. I will show you this in more detail in the next video, but for now, just know that they fit perfectly and they can now be tilted up all the way. A lot of viewers have commented on the waterline and that the motors are hanging too low. Even after I put them further up substantially, some viewers still believe that the motors will be hanging so low that they will drown in the water, especially once I start putting stuff onto the boat. This is probably because of the position I set the waterline at. But if we look at this footage from the day I bought the boat, you can see that the actual waterline is a good 20 centimeters below the waterline that I have drawn. And bear in mind that the boat had a good 3,000 to 4,000 liters of water inside of it, so that's an extra 3 to 4 tons of weight. Furthermore, because of the flat bottom shape of the hull, unlike a conventional V-shaped type hull, this boat displaces a lot of water with minimal immersion. Now the total displacement is about 50 tons, given that the hull has a total height of a little over 1 meter. Speaking in a very simplified fashion, you could say that the waterline moves up about 2 centimeters for every ton of weight. But in reality, because the hull widens the further up we go, the amount of immersion per ton of weight decreases accordingly. Now this being said, the transoms will reach somewhat into the water, and in their current form they will create a lot of drag. So my plan is to cover up the bottom and sides with thin steel plates to prevent the water from getting behind the transom plates. Next, let's have a look at the inside of the barge boat. Here we have cleaned out the two end compartments sitting at the bow and stern of the boat. This is the compartment at the stern. So far it was only freed from debris and is currently waiting to be painted. Here's the compartment at the bow. This one has been almost fully sealed with Overtroll oil and is currently waiting for the main layer of paint. The large middle section of the boat is mostly untouched. So far, we've only cleared out a small area and painted with Overtroll oil so that it can eventually be used as storage space. Speaking of bow and stern, many viewers have commented that I've mounted the motors onto the bow of the boat and that the bow thruster is thus sitting at the stern. And you're absolutely right. The fin here at the current bow was originally used as a support for a rudder, and so this is the actual stern of the boat. And the motors have indeed been mounted onto the bow. And I did this fully knowingly. See, the boat is perfectly symmetrical. The measurements and shapes of the bow and stern are totally identical. There isn't a rivet at the bow that's not in the exact same location at the stern. I've chosen to invert the bow and stern because the old bow was totally dinged up, whereas the stern was mostly intact. Plus, this fin, now at the bow, will serve as a wave breaker or even an icebreaker and will provide support for a protective cage that I plan to build around the bow thruster. Alright, now my next update is a real banger and will probably surprise you. You may remember that in a previous video I showed how I found what I assumed to be a production number at one end of the boat. After seeing this video, a viewer reached out to me and told me that it's actually a registration number from Amsterdam. He sent me a link to some kind of an archive website of historic boat registrations. During those registrations, the boats were measured, the displacement was calculated, and the registration number was engraved into the hull. According to this website, this boat was first registered in 1902, which makes it a whopping 120 years old. Now, I was told by the seller that the boat was built in 1957, so needless to say, I was pretty shocked by this find and I needed more proof. Well, on the page about the registration from 1902, there was a mention that the boat was measured a second time in 1940, and maybe during that second measurement, a second registration number was engraved, so I went ahead and searched for it. Next to the first number, there was nothing, but on the other end, there was a number. It wasn't the registration number from the form from 1940, maybe that one still lies beneath the paint somewhere, but what I found instead was this number. And this number was recorded during the 1940 measurement. And we also find it here on the original document from 1940, which refers to the registration number from 1902, and thus, without a doubt, this boat that I have here is 120 years old. There are some other interesting documents to be found on this website, such as a bill of sale from 1954 and some registration from the 1990s. In the measurement forms, we find the name Bernhard as the shipyard who built this barge. Founded in 1855, they were building these so-called deck barges for decades before they made the one I currently own. Here is an image of the Bernhard shipyard from the 1920s. If we zoom in, we can see a rudder attached to that stern fin, which is missing from my boat. And while I thought I had found a relatively rare boat, it turns out that these deck barges were extremely common in the Dutch canal and coastal waterways, although I'm afraid that by today there aren't too many left. So, who could have thought that I not only find the shipyard that my boat originally came from, but that I would receive a copy of the original measurement and registration from 120 years ago. Of course, I would have never found out were it not for that awesome person who reached out to me. So to you, my friend, thank you very, very much. And that concludes today's video. Now it's up to you to go out and chase some rabbits. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video.